Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. Every country needs accurate, timely and authentic data in order to decide the direction of its economy, in order to understand whether policies have succeeded or failed and how do we need to tweak them further. Data particularly on GDP growth, consumer spending, tax collections, investments, etc. are extremely important for a country to understand where is it headed to. In India, we have a number of agencies which actually collect and analyze data. The National Statistical Commission does it as an apex body. Organizations like the NCAER, the Reserve Bank of India, and various other trade and statutory bodies collect and disseminate data. What we have seen in recent years is that whenever any kind of data is issued which does not suit the government simply junks it or says that it is not reliable. We saw that happen when a report came saying that joblessness in the country had shot up. The government challenged it and said it was not correct, and it gave EPFO enrollment figures in a very misleading manner in order to say that jobs are being created. That also happened when an NSO report came out on consumer spending data, which said that consumer spending has fallen for the first time in 40 years. The government immediately junked it and said it was not correct. It was not even open to a debate. For all you know, the data in the report or its methodology could have been flawed, but the government's first reaction was junk it. And then this particular stand of the government is also very often exposed when former officials of the government make claims saying that data that was given during their tenure was not correct. The former chief economic advisor, after he quit his job, he made a statement saying that while the government claims that India's GDP has been growing at the rate of 6.5% plus, he said that the actual rate is in the range of 3.5%. That was a startling revelation, and that actually junks the government's own claims. Even the former finance secretary, Mr. S.C. Garg, post his retirement said that the fiscal deficit data given by the government is grossly incorrect. The unfortunate part is that both these gentlemen were the ones during whose tenure these kind of flawed data, erroneous and misleading data were issued by the government, and they really said nothing. Our stand is, whatever be the government data, if it does not match with the ground reality on a daily basis, then there must be something wrong with the data. It is the common businessman whose daily operations make him feel the pulse, and they know what is the direction of the economy. Is the GDP growing in the manner the government claims or does not claim? And of late, the all-round reaction comes is that government overestimates data related to GDP growth, etc., and that data is not reliable. In order to combat these regular claims by various persons and experts that government tends to give overestimated data where it suits it and underestimated ones also where it suits it, the economic survey contained a chapter devoted only to say that the GDP figures given by the government are not flawed. It said that the figures given by the government are not overestimated. The economic survey says that it was in 2011 that India changed its methodology of computing the GDP, and that was to get it in uniformity with the UN method that all other nations were adopting. It says further that the accusation is that India's GDP growth has been overestimated by 2.77%. But then, based on certain detailed economic calculation and econometrics and statistical analysis, the survey claims that even the data, the GDP data of UK, France, Belgium, Singapore, South Africa, and it says at least 51 out of 95 countries, the data given is flawed. India, it says, is not the only one. In fact, it further says, the accusation it says is that India's GDP growth has been overestimated by about 40%. It says that if you go by the same methodology, the GDP growth of UK and Germany has been overestimated by over 70%. The survey further says that it is wrong to try to compare the GDP data of various countries to find fault with the data of one country, and thus it says that it is wrong to compare the GDP data of India with any other country. The economic survey then makes a point that let's keep all this statistical data aside and let's go by what we would call a common sense factor. And that it says is, look at the GDP growth from the angle of new firms being registered in India in the formal sector. Because the economic survey claims that for every 10% jump in the number of new firms registered in the formal sector, the GDP growth goes up by 1.8% in that district where there has been a rise in the number of new firms registered. It says that since 2014, the number of firms registered in India has shot up significantly across all the 504 districts, and thus according to it, there has been a big boost to India's GDP growth. It has thus relied on the number of firms registered as one of the common parameters by which, without referring to statistics, complicated methodologies, one should conclude what is the direction of the economy. And the economic survey says that because more and more firms are being registered, it certainly means growth is taking place. At the very outset, we actually challenge this very claim of the economic survey that new firms are being registered. By a very admission of the finance minister in the parliament, over 7 lakh firms have been closed down in the last few years. We would take it further. Why just look at new firms only because it suits the government's claims? Let us try to judge the direction of the GDP growth with other factors. Tax collection. Tax collection has been going down. It means GDP has actually gone down. It also contradicts the claim of the economic survey that new firms got registered. Because if new firms had got registered, tax collection goes up because more entities are now liable to pay income tax. So why not compare the direction of the GDP growth with tax collection, which has been falling, joblessness, which has been rising, new investments, which have been stagnating, consumer spending, which has registered a decline for the first time in 40 years, purchase of new houses, which are again languishing, and of course, the impact of demonetization. So why just look at GDP growth from one single factor, which is new firms, which also we claim is not very correct on the part of the economic survey, and why not on the basis of tax collections, jobs, investments, spending, demonetization, purchase of new houses, etc., all of which indicate that India's GDP growth is not what the government claims it to be, and thus the very analysis done by the economic survey, according to us, is flawed. It is this huge disconnect between the ground reality and the rosy statistics that the government may want us to believe, and the government's immediate reaction to any adverse report that comes out, which is junk it. It is because of this attitude of the government that now a huge doubt has been raised on the veracity and authenticity of the data that comes before us from government agencies. Yet another report now says that the National Statistical Organization, which had agreed to finally release that particular report in which it was found that consumer spending in India has gone down for the first time in 40 years. It had agreed to make it public, but now the report says that the government has decided not to make it public. That is something serious according to us, for the simple reason, why are we first of all presuming that that data and that methodology itself must have been correct? It needs a debate. It might turn out that that report is flawed and might be rightly junked, but then a public debate is needed, a discussion amongst the experts is needed. The government has just forced all that. The second issue that comes is, in case the conclusions are right, then that's a matter of concern for the country. Consumer spending going down means perhaps poverty has gone up, or certainly prosperity of the middle class has gone down. That also is a matter of concern. So junking an important report on an important point without a discussion is not really the right thing to do. And now the government says that there will be a fresh survey conducted on this subject. That survey will be conducted in FY 21 and 22. But then at the moment we are dealing with the aftermath of the CAA and the NRC issues. The chances are that cooperation of all those who are being surveyed might not come so forthwith in the present circumstances. Thus, it is when the government scraps a report merely because its conclusion doesn't suit it is when even further doubt is raised. It erodes the transparency of debate in the country. It erodes the authenticity and autonomy of those institutions from which these reports come. And we think that is a larger picture, which is a matter of concern. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.